Part 2B. If you haven't seen it yet, go back to Part 2A. And if you haven't seen previous to that, Part 1 of Political System Explorations. Current title anyways. Maybe we'll progress as we go. Adam Smith had noted in this quote, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." He didn't try to impose something, he tried to observe the nature, and he tried to look at how people are benefiting. And he observed what was going on. This is one of the early elements of praxeology, the observation of human action, human nature. Now that doesn't mean that you won't be able to sell socialism as serving the self as well, because you could very easily say that, well, look at all the benefits that you get from socialism, and use that as a form of appeal to the selfish nature of humanity. If you serve the system will serve you. It's an attempt at reciprocity, and that in itself is admirable. And I say that because I see capitalism for the same reason that it is admirable for its appeal to reciprocity. Okay, then, new day. Let's try and pick up the pace a bit, see if we can go on. From reciprocity, we go to point number 3. Capitalism fails under the use of currency and varying pay scales, Tornado says. I have to disagree with that. On principle 1, okay, we are not looking at capitalism out there. We're looking at some bunch of systems, a lot of them mercantilist, most of them some variation of governmental control and intervention and interference. So we don't have real free market economics out there. And capitalism is free market economics, that's what it's founded on. So say that capitalism fails when you don't have a system that's failing in front of you is a little bit off to start with. And to say that it fails under currency, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I can see failing currencies out there, but if you look at all the problems that are involved with failing currencies, you have to realize that those failures are due to a lack of capitalization. There's nothing backing it up. People have borrowed money to buy houses for more than they're worth, that they can't afford to pay for. It's driven the market up. People are operating under a debt situation rather than a savings situation. There used to be a time when people used to save money. That was before they took over the central banking system and generated inflation, which reduced the value of the money, which drove people to spend. So it was more conducive to go out and spend the money right away to keep it so that you use its current value rather than its future devalued value. Okay, under varying pay scales, I have a problem with that. When you use the comparison of under barter having a plumber and a doctor where they're both equally exchanging, and I disagree with that because plumbers are of a cartel. They have their own protectionist system that artificially elevates their wages above what it would normally be otherwise. For one thing. For another, even if you use the current pay scales that the plumbers have, compared to a doctor, I don't think it's the same. Also, currencies make it easier because that way you can use direct exchange instead of indirect exchange, and say that I want to go to a doctor and offer him my plumbing services because I need doctoring services, but the doctor doesn't need plumbing services, so I have to go and offer plumbing services to somebody else who might have something that the doctor might want, and then have to go to the doctor with that. So it ends up being an indirect exchange. Better to have currency as a universal, what they call a common medium in exchange. It saves a lot of time and effort. Commodity money is favorable under a free market because it's less prone to manipulation, the way that printing press rights can be manipulated. The government uses it in various ways to its own advantage when it can. It also hides a lot of what the value would be. Under commodity money, we have our own money and we know what it's worth, and if we don't agree with something, we don't have to support it. We don't allow our money to filter through it. Right now, all of our currency, the fiat monies, are going through the government. The government has a capacity to print it when needed. You can't print gold, you can't print silver. These are commodities. They have values in and of themselves, in the market, that is, that would retain those market values plus whatever value it gains as a currency. Plus it would be attached to a historical value. That's also a necessity of money. That gets a lot and very complicated sort of thing that I don't want to go into right now, so suffice it to say that I basically disagree with that idea. Then I wanted to go under the other point, under socialism, those supporting the system are granted proportional rights. Okay then, if they're granted proportional rights, you have to establish some sort of way of mediating all that accountancy, because basically people are going to want to go out. If you're going to act, you're going to act for a reason. It's going to require a return. If you don't have some sort of accountability that is justifiable, that is worthwhile, if I'm going to act, it has to be worthwhile. I have to have a return on my efforts. So you have to establish what scale are you going to use for that proportionality of granting rights. Once you establish the scale and find a means of accounting for the exchanges, you have to realize that you've just created a new currency. You can't escape that. It's a fundamental requirement. We have to have the ability to make exchanges on some sort of justifiable level to ourselves. Okay? People act on motivation. Primary motivation is to support their own lives. Once they've managed to sustain their lives, then it comes down to a point of how far they can go to further their lives, to make it better, to improve it, to make it more pleasant, to make it more enjoyable. See, Tornado, one of the problems that I'm having is this idea of driving oneself to act in a selfless manner, to act on the behalf of others. Because, for one thing, all of those others have their own ability to act on their own behalf. Why would it be necessary for me to act on their behalf? I mean, I'd be second guessing all the time. Wouldn't it be much better if I acted on my own behalf and let other people act on their own behalf? Remember, the fundamental driver to act is that motivation to sustain one's own life. So why would it be necessary for me to drop that in favor of going around and sustaining other people's lives, and other people going around and sustaining not their lives but other people's lives? Why would we go through that torturous ordeal, since we are not empathic? We can't second guess what other people want, need, or whatnot. We're all different. We all have different requirements. Aren't we going to lose that if we try to start behaving by flipping around and saying we shouldn't act on our own behalf, we should act on other people's behalf? Isn't that assuming that other people can't act on their own behalf? What is the nature of people if not to be able to act on their own behalf? If you take it and flip it around in a diseased fashion and say that everybody's sick and can't act on their own behalf, I don't think you're going to have a system that ends up being very conducive to the existence of human life. So think about that for a moment. Okay? Thanks. Bye for now.